I had waited my whole life for retirement. 35 years in classrooms, standing on tired feet, raising other people's children while raising my own alone. And finally, at 67, I had freedom. No alarm clocks, no lesson plans, just quiet mornings and the promise of doing something for myself for the first time ever. That afternoon, I sat in my living room with a cup of coffee, travel brochures spread across the table, national parks, coastal highways, small towns I had only seen in books. I felt lighter than I had in decades. Then my phone rang. I didn't need to look at the screen to know who it was. My daughter-in-law. She never called to ask how I was. She never called to check in. When she called, it meant she needed something. "Helen," she said, sharp and rushed, skipping any greeting. "I'm leaving the kids with you." I blinked. "Excuse me, I have an important trip." 2 weeks. You'll watch Aiden, Chloe, and Leo. There it was. Not a request. A decision already made. "I wasn't asked," I said carefully. "And I have plans." She laughed, the kind of laugh that cuts. "Plans? What plans could you possibly have now? You're retired. You don't do anything anymore." Those words landed harder than she knew. I had buried my husband after a highway accident. I had raised my son alone on a teacher's salary. I had skipped meals so he could have shoes. And now, apparently, I did nothing. "You can drop them off tomorrow morning," she continued. "7 sharp. And don't spoil them. Last time you fed them garbage." The line went dead. I sat there staring at the wall. My retirement certificate, framed like a joke. All those years of sacrifice, reduced to being a free babysitter on demand. Ooh. That's when something inside me cracked. Or maybe woke up. I wasn't always a quiet woman. I had spent decades managing classrooms full of difficult children and entitled parents. I knew manipulation when I saw it. I knew control. And I knew when someone thought they could walk all over me because they believed I was too old, too tired, or too kind to fight back. I stood up, slowly, deliberately, and picked up my phone again. I called an old friend, Carol Dot, another retired teacher, sharp as a blade and loyal to the bone. "Are you still good keeping records?" I asked. She paused. "Helen, what's going on?" "I need help," I said, "and I need it quiet." That night, sleep didn't come easily. Memories flooded in. Raising my son after his father died, working double shifts, selling personal belongings to pay bills. I remembered how proud I was when he graduated, how grateful I felt when he married someone I believed loved him. I remembered how slowly that woman changed. At first, it was subtle comments, then control, then distance. Visits became rare. Phone calls disappeared. My grandchildren grew up without me, not because I didn't want them, but because someone decided I didn't matter. And now, suddenly, I mattered again, not because I was loved, but because I was useful. The next morning, at exactly 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. She was punctual when it benefited her. She didn't step inside. She listed instructions like I was staff. Allergies, screen time rules, food preferences. Then she leaned closer and whispered, "Remember, what happens here stays here. I decide whether you see them again." And then she left. No hugs, No goodbyes, just the sound of her engine pulling away. I stood in my doorway with 3 children who barely looked at me. A phone-addicted 12-year-old. A guarded 10-year-old. A 7-year-old already searching for a screen. They didn't see a grandmother. They saw a place they didn't want to be. And that's when I realized something important. She hadn't just abandoned me. She had trained her children to reject me. And I also realized something else. If there was one thing I knew how to do after 35 years of teaching, it was how to deal with children shaped by the mistakes of adults. What happened during that first night under my roof revealed just how deeply their mother had poisoned them, and why this visit would change our family forever. The silence after their mother left was heavier than I expected. 3 children stood in my hallway like misplaced luggage. No hugs, no curiosity, just irritation and distrust. The kind that doesn't come naturally, it's learned. Aiden dropped his suitcase with a thud and immediately asked, "Where's the Wi-Fi?" "It's not working," I said calmly. His face twisted. "What do you mean not working?" "I mean it's off." Chloe crossed her arms. "Mom said you'd do this. She said you like controlling people." There it was. Not confusion. Not fear. A script. Ugh. Leo didn't say anything. He just stared at the television like it might turn itself on out of pity. I took a slow breath. "We'll talk first, then we'll eat." "I'm not eating your food," Chloe snapped. "Mom says you don't cook properly." I nodded, as if she told me the weather. "You can decide after you try it." That set them off. Aiden shouted. Chloe rolled her eyes dramatically. Leo flopped onto the couch and began kicking the cushions. Within minutes, my quiet home felt like a battlefield. Aiden slammed his bedroom door so hard a picture frame fell. Chloe cried loudly. On purpose. Leo refused to change clothes and demanded his tablet. They weren't acting out because they were spoiled. They were testing me. They wanted to know if I would disappear too. Dinner was awkward. Barely touched plates. Complaints about everything. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I simply cleaned up and said, "Bedrooms, we'll talk in the morning." That was when the real storm began. Aiden kicked his door repeatedly. Chloe screamed that she hated it here. Leo wet the bed, intentionally, and laughed when I noticed. By midnight, I was exhausted, but I wasn't angry. I was alert, because children don't behave like this unless someone taught them fear, entitlement, or both. At 2 in the morning, I heard crying. Not yelling, crying. It came from Chloe's room. I knocked once and opened the door slowly. She was curled up on the bed, clutching something to her chest. A photograph. I recognized it instantly. I'm holding her as a baby, back when I was still allowed to exist in their lives. She tried to hide it when she saw me. "I wasn't snooping," she whispered. "It was in my bag." I sat on the edge of the bed. "Do you miss your mom?" She answered too quickly. "No." Then, quieter. "She leaves a lot." That sentence told me everything. I didn't push. I didn't lecture. I simply said, "Tomorrow, we'll make breakfast together." She didn't answer, but she didn't tell me to leave either. Morning came early. I made pancakes shaped like animals. fruit cut into stars. Nothing fancy. Just care. Aiden walked in first, stopped, and stared. What's this? Breakfast. He took a bite, then immediately masked his reaction. It's okay. I've had better. But he kept eating. Leo climbed onto the chair and grinned. These are good. Don't say that, Chloe hissed. After breakfast, I laid out rules. Simple ones. No screens, unless chores were done. Respectful language. Everyone contributes. Aiden scoffed. That's child labor. Smiled. No, that's family. While they cleaned, complaining but obeying, I noticed Aiden's phone left on the counter. Notifications kept lighting up the screen. I shouldn't have looked, but something told me I needed to. What I found made my stomach drop. Messages, photos, conversations between their mother and a man I didn't recognize. Trips that weren't work trips. Plans that didn't include my son. And one sentence that chilled me to the bone. I'll leave the kids with the old woman. It buys me time. Time. Not love. Not trust. Time. That evening, I watched children differently. Aiden's anger. Chloe's guarded silence. Leo's reckless behavior. These weren't bad kids. They were neglected ones. And suddenly, I understood why their mother had dumped them on my doorstep without hesitation. She didn't need a babysitter. She needed cover. What I uncovered next, hidden in that phone, would expose a secret so dangerous it forced me to make a decision that could shatter my son's marriage forever. That night, I barely slept. Not because of the children, but because of what I had seen. Every time I closed my eyes, those messages replayed in my mind. The casual cruelty, the lies dressed up as business trips, and the way she spoke about her own children like inconvenient baggage. By morning, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just about babysitting. This was about protecting 3 children who had been emotionally abandoned long before they ever arrived at my door. The day started badly. Leo found a box of old fireworks in the garage, leftover from years ago, and decided it would be fun to light one inside the house. The bang was loud enough to shake the walls. Smoke filled the dining room. Curtain caught fire at the edge. Chloe screamed. Aiden laughed nervously. Leo clapped like he was watching a video. I put out the fire in seconds, but my hands were shaking. Why would you do that? I demanded. Leo shrugged. Mom says this house doesn't matter. She said when you're gone, she'll sell it anyway. The words hit harder than the explosion. I knelt in front of him. Who told you that? Mom, he said simply. She said it ugly. Like you. That was the moment I understood how deep this went. Later that afternoon, while the children were cleaning in silence, I gently asked questions. Not accusations, just openings. Who's Uncle Dominic? I asked casually. Aiden stiffened. Chloe dropped a plate. Leo answered without thinking. He sleeps in Mom's room. The room went dead, quiet. Aiden turned on his brother. You weren't supposed to say that. Why not? I asked softly. Chloe's eyes filled with tears. Mom said if Dad ever finds out, he'll get sick. Like, really sick. She said it would be our fault. There it was. Fierce control. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't react dramatically. I just listened while pieces of the truth fell into place. This man wasn't a guest. He was a replacement. And the children had been carrying the secret alone. That evening, I made a decision I had avoided for years. I called my son. Michael, I said, keeping my voice steady. I need you to come by tomorrow after work. There's something wrong with the house. He hesitated. Is it serious? Yes, I said. It's serious. When he arrived the next evening, he looked exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes, shoulders slumped from years of carrying a family he barely recognized anymore. The children hovered in the doorway. I sat him down and showed him everything. The messages, the photos, the financial records, the trips. He didn't say a word for a long time. Then his voice broke. I trusted her. I know, I said. That doesn't make you weak. That's when Aiden stepped forward. Dad, he said quietly. We already knew. Michael looked up at his children like he was seeing them for the first time. All three of them started talking at once. About Uncle Dominic. About the lies. About the warnings. About how they were told never to tell him. My son covered his face with his hands. He didn't cry. He collapsed. That night, I watched my son hug his children longer than I had ever seen him hug anyone. And for the first time, the house felt different. Safer, but also dangerous. Because I knew one thing now. When their mother returned, she wouldn't come back confused or apologetic. She would come back angry. And people like her don't surrender quietly. While the children slept, I organized everything. Screenshots, call logs, photos, timelines. I called Carol again. I called a lawyer. I called someone I never thought I'd need to call. Child services. Not to punish. To document. To protect. 'Cause this wasn't about revenge. It was about stopping someone who saw her children as tools. As shields. As excuses. I stood in the hallway that night, listening to the quiet breathing behind 3-bedroom doors. They weren't bad kids. They were scared ones. And they deserved someone who wouldn't look away anymore. But what we discovered next, hidden on a device one of the children secretly saved, proved she wasn't just lying. She was planning to disappear with them forever. Nights before their mother was supposed to return, Chloe came into my room without knocking. She was shaking. In her hands was a small flash drive. I wasn't spying, she whispered quickly. I swear, she told me to hide it so Dad wouldn't find it. But I got scared. I sat up slowly. Hide what, sweetheart? She swallowed hard. Her other phone. She copied things onto this. She said if anything went wrong, this was our exit plan. My chest tightened. I plugged the drive into my laptop while Chloe sat beside me, knees pulled to her chest. What opened on the screen made my blood run cold. Documents, emails, voice notes, plane tickets, one way, a lease agreement for an apartment in Miami, and a folder labeled Custody Strategy. Inside were drafts of messages accusing my son of emotional abuse, notes about coaching the children on what to say, instructions written in cold, organized bullet points. Children must repeat story consistently, emphasize grandmother's control, claim fear if questioned, She wasn't just planning to leave. She was planning to erase him, and she was willing to turn her children into weapons to do it. I closed the laptop and pulled Chloe into my arms. She didn't cry loudly. She shook, like someone who had been holding everything in for far too long. "You did the right thing," I told her. "You're very brave." The next morning, we told Michael everything. This time, he didn't crumble. Something in him hardened, not into anger, but resolve. "He's not taking them," he said quietly. "Not now. Not ever." That day moved fast. Lawyers were contacted. Evidence was duplicated. Child services were informed, not as an emergency removal, but as a preemptive record. We didn't want chaos. We wanted protection. When their mother finally returned, she walked into a house that was no longer hers. Her smile disappeared the moment she saw the attorneys sitting at the dining table. "What is this?" she snapped. Michael stood up. "It's the truth." She laughed, sharp and defensive. "You're being dramatic. Your mother has always tried to interfere." That's when Chloe spoke. Her voice was quiet, but it didn't shake. "Mom, you told us to lie." The room froze. Aiden followed. "You said Dad would get sick if we told him." Leo looked at the floor. "You said we'd forget him anyway." For the first time, she had nothing to say. No charm. No manipulation. Just rage. She turned to me. "You did this. You poisoned them." I met her eyes calmly. "No, I listened to them. Something you stopped doing a long time ago." The papers were signed that afternoon. Temporary custody. Supervised visits only. When she stormed out, slamming the door behind her, the house fell silent. Not the heavy, fearful silence we had lived in before, but a quiet that felt like air returning to a sealed room. That night, we ate dinner together. No shouting, no screams, just conversation. Leo told a joke. Chloe laughed without checking anyone's reaction first. Aiden asked if he could stay longer. Michael looked at me across the table. "I didn't see it," he said softly. "I should have." "You see it now," I replied. "That's what matters." Later, after the children were asleep, I sat alone in the living room. The same room where this had all begun. I realized something then. Retirement hadn't taken my purpose away. It had finally given me the clarity to protect what mattered most. I wasn't just a grandmother. I was the safe place they had been denied, and I would never give that up again. But the story didn't end when she walked out that door, because healing takes time. And what happened in the weeks that followed proved that sometimes the strongest families are rebuilt from the deepest betrayals. The house felt different after she left. Not empty, lighter. For the first few days, the children moved cautiously, like they were waiting for someone to burst through the door and take everything back. Trauma doesn't disappear just because the source is gone. Leo asked every night, "She's not coming back, right?" Chloe kept her backpack packed by the door. Aiden pretended not to care, but flinched every time his phone buzzed. Healing doesn't arrive all at once. It arrives quietly, in small moments. Michael took time off work, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. For the first time, his attention wasn't split between exhaustion and damage control. Mornings became slower. We ate breakfast together. Real breakfasts. No rush schedules. No shouting. One afternoon, I overheard Leo telling his friend on the phone, "My dad listens now." That sentence alone was worth everything. There were still hard days. Chloe woke up screaming from nightmares. Aiden lashed out when he felt overwhelmed. Leo tested boundaries constantly, afraid that stability might vanish if he didn't push it. But something important had changed. They were no longer afraid to speak. We started therapy, not because anyone was broken, but because wounds deserve care. The children learned that adults don't get to ask them to lie. Michael learned how silence can hurt as much as shouting. And I learned something about myself, too. I had spent years shrinking to avoid conflict, accepting distance as normal, telling myself it was better not to interfere. Oh, I was wrong. One evening, weeks later, Chloe sat beside me on the couch. "Grandma," she said quietly, "why didn't you stop her sooner?" The question stung, but it was fair. I took her hand. Because I didn't know everything. And because sometimes adults think staying quiet is the same as keeping peace. It isn't. She nodded slowly. "I'm glad you didn't stay quiet this time." So was I. Their mother tried to call. Messages came through lawyers. Apologies mixed with excuses. Promises that sounded too polished to be real. We didn't rush anything. Supervised visits happened. Slowly. Carefully. The children set boundaries, something they had never been allowed to do before. And then came the moment that told me we were going to be okay. It was a Sunday afternoon. The kids were sprawled across the living room floor, arguing over a board game. Aiden laughed. Actually laughed. When he lost. Leo curled up next to Michael with a book. Chloe rested her head on my shoulder without saying a word. No fear. No tension. Just presence. That night, after everyone went to bed, Michael sat across from me at the kitchen table. "I almost lost them," he said quietly. "But you didn't," I replied. He shook his head. "Because of you." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Because you chose to listen when it mattered." Retirement had given me time. But this had given me meaning. I wasn't just watching over my grandchildren. I was helping them rewrite the story they'd been forced to live in. One where love wasn't conditional. One where truth didn't come with threats. One where family meant safety. And I knew something else now. Something I wished I'd learned earlier in life. Being old doesn't make you invisible. Being kind doesn't mean being weak. And protecting the ones you love is never interference. It's responsibility. If there's one lesson this story leaves behind, it's this: sometimes the bravest thing a grandmother can do isn't spoil her grandchildren. It's stand up and refuse to let anyone break them again.